His secret began with a scream that never should have echoed across the Tennessee mountains, a kind of sound that cut through the wind and made birds erupt from the trees. Because on that cold morning, veteran Michael Carter heard something inside the cave. Nobody was ever allowed to open a cave sealed decades ago with warnings carved into stone and reinforced with rusty chains that looked ancient enough to crumble under a touch and yet strong enough to hold. Back a past no one dared to disturb for. 50 years he had lived with the weight of what lay inside that cave, protecting it, guarding it, and making sure the world stayed far away. But everything changed the moment his German shepherd Rex began dragging him toward the cave entrance. His fur bristled, and his deep growl trembling like a living alarm. Because Rex had sensed something Michael had ignored for too long. The chains were shifting, and something or someone wanted to be found. And before we dive deeper into this powerful journey, please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unseen battles carried quietly by people like Michael, because your support truly keeps stories like this alive and reaching the hearts of those who need them. For most of his life, Michael had been defined by silence, not weakness, but the kind of quiet that comes after losing too much in the army. He had served in the most dangerous missions and returned with scars that didn't show on his skin, but carved into his soul. His wife, Hannah, had tried to understand, but the fear in her eyes every time he woke up gasping at night had slowly grown into distance, then into separation, and finally into a gentle parting that left him with nothing but their son Jacob, who visited only during school breaks. That was why Michael moved back to mountains of his childhood, building a small wooden home near the giant cave his grandfather had once guarded and told him to protect. No matter what happened, his grandfather Daniel had been a respected veteran himself, known for his calm strength and mysterious past. And before he died, he gave Michael one warning: never let anyone open a cave if the chains ever move. Call for help immediately, never forget some darkness. Mustay, buried Michael, kept the promise, but he never truly understood what the warning meant. For years, hikers, teenagers, and tourists tried to peek inside, but the old chains held firm, never shifting, never breaking, until now. Rex had never reacted to the cave before, but that morning his instincts were burning like fire. He barked, clawed at the snow, and shoved his head against the chains, as if urging Michael to see what he sensed, and Michael felt a strange chill crawl up his spine. Something about the air was wrong, colder, heavier, carrying a faint metallic scent like fear had been frozen into it. He bent down, brushed away the fresh snow, and his heart slammed against his ribs. The chains were loose. No, they weren't just loose. They were cut as if someone had sliced through them during the night. But the cuts weren't clean. They were torn, bent violently from the inside outward, as if something had forced its way against the metal, and that made Michael's breath tighten. Because the cave had been untouched for over half a century, and his grandfather's warning thundered back into his mind louder than ever. As he slowly pushed a heavy stone aside, a gust of damp air rushed out, carrying the smell of earth and rust, and something else, something old and unsettling. He raised his flashlight and stepped inside with Rex beside him, muscles tense, ready to protect his owner with his life. The cave tunnel stretched deep, with walls marked by strange carvings, lines, circles, and symbols that looked like a map mixed with warnings, and Michael's pulse quickened because these markings were identical to those his grandfather used in his old military notes. Secret codes meant only for high-risk operations Michael never had the clearance to know about. He followed the tunnel deeper, boots crunching on gravel, the air turning colder, the darkness thickening until the passage opened into a wide chamber, and Michael froze because the chamber floor wasn't empty like he always believed. It was filled with metal cages, broken chains, scattered tools, military-grade locks, and piles of old equipment. And suddenly, Michael realized why no one was allowed inside. This wasn't a cave, it was a containment site. Rex pulled him toward the far corner, where a heavy crate lay cracked open. Inside it, Michael found files preserved in waterproof cases marked with government seals. He wiped the dust and read the first label: Operation Sentinel Phase 1 Containment. Subjects transported, primary responsibility Daniel Carter. And Michael felt the world tilt around him. The cave wasn't just his grandfather's secret, it was a classified site. His grandfather was once assigned to guard something dangerous enough to keep hidden underground, far from towns or bases. Michael opened the file, hands shaking, and began reading reports from the 1960s describing a group of captured men who had been part of a rogue unit conducting illegal experiments deep in the mountains, experiments involving kidnapping, torture, and psychological manipulation. And his grandfather's mission had been to rescue the victims and imprison the perpetrators under strict silence to prevent national panic. But the files ended abruptly with a final, chilling note: subjects unreformed, recommend permanent containment, no release authorized. Michael swallowed hard, knowing those men would now be extremely old and alive, but the torn chains on the ground told him the past had not stayed buried. Rex lowered his head and growled at a trail of footprints, leading deeper into another unlit tunnel. Human footprints, small, limp, uneven, and recent. Michael followed the trail, heart pounding, until his flashlight beam landed on a figure slumped against the wall, a man, thin, pale, trembling, wrapped in an old, tattered blanket, his eyes sunken, but alive. He looked barely 70, and when Michael checked him for injury, he saw the man's wrists raw from torn chains, and Michael understood this was one of the subjects who had been imprisoned since the era of his grandfather, one of the dangerous men locked away to prevent harm. But something was wrong. The man wasn't hostile. He was terrified, shaking like a trapped animal, and he kept trying to lift his hand, pointing to the darkest corner of the tunnel, as if warning Michael that something else was inside, something far worse than him. Rex barked, and before Michael could move, the darkness stirred, and another figure stepped forward, limping, dragging a thick chain behind him, bigger, stronger face, twisted with age and resentment, and Michael felt cold realization this was the true threat the leader mentioned in the files, the one responsible for the experiments, the one deemed too dangerous to ever be freed. Suddenly, the leader lunged, and Rex sprang forward, teeth bare, protecting Michael with ferocity that echoed through the cave, and in the struggle that followed, Michael managed to knock the attacker into the metal bars of an old cage that collapsed, trapping the man long enough for Michael to secure him with fallen chains. And as the echoes settled, Michael realized he had just finished a mission his grandfather began decades ago. Ranger's instinct, strength, and loyalty had prevented a nightmare from slipping into the world again, and as authorities arrived, sealing the cave, securing files, and taking both surviving men into custody, Michael felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride for the legacy. He upheld sorrow for the lives shattered by a darkness hidden in the mountains for so long. But something else happened too, something unexpected. For the first time in years, Michael felt the weight on his heart lighten, as if silence was no longer punishment, but peace, as if purpose had returned him. The town that once whispered about him now approached with respect, calling him a hero, while Rex became a legend, the dog who uncovered the chains of buried truth. And near the end of this emotional journey, if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, because your support truly helps more stories of courage and hope reach others who may need strength. And before we reach the ending, please comment below which moment in this story moved you the most. In the weeks that followed, Michael rebuilt parts of the cave entrance under full supervision, sealing the danger forever, and he stood on the ridge one sunset, watching Rex play in the snow, feeling the mountain wind brush against his face, and he whispered a quiet promise to the memory of his grandfather that he would protect the land, the legacy, and the truth, just as Daniel once did. And as light stretched across the Tennessee woods, Michael finally felt something he hadn't in years, not fear, not sorrow, but gratitude, because sometimes fate chooses unlikely heroes, sometimes a cave holds more history than a town ever realizes, and sometimes a loyal German shepherd finds the chains that lead a broken veteran back to purpose, hope, and a life worth living again.